Okay, hello YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about how to meet early weird pawn moves in the opening. So let's say we start the opening with e4, e5. I play knight f3, they play knight c6. I play an Italian game, and then they play something like h6. Now on the Lichess database, this move is super popular. You can see that we've got like hundreds of thousands of games with this move h6. On the Masters database, this has only been played a handful of times. And I'm going to get into the reason now for why. So among amateur players, people will often play this move, this early pawn to h6, because they're worried about this move, knight to g5, coming. So, for example, if they played something like the two knights defense, they would have to worry about the fried liver attack beginning with knight g5. And a lot of amateur players have really bad experiences with the fried liver, like losing an exchange or getting into trouble with the king attack, etc. So a lot of them will try to play this move pawn to h6 because they're trying to be safe and they're trying to prevent this move knight to g5. So how should we respond to this early h6 move? Well, h6 is a non-developing move in a very sharp opening. This is an e-pawn opening, e4, e5. The position has the potential to open. So what should we do? We should open the position immediately. We should play pawn to d4. Pawn to d4 should be played kind of without question. So the beginner answer to why we should play d4 is whenever your opponent is wasting time in the opening with like any type of weird early pawn move, whether it be h6, b6, a6, whatever, we want to strike in the middle with d4 and open the position because they haven't moved a piece. The advanced explanation of this is that basically we're playing the Scotch opening up a tempo. So like the normal kind of Scotch opening happens after e4, e5, and then knight f3, knight c6, and then here we would play d4. So after d4 and say e takes d4, knight takes d4, we would have a normal Scotch with something like knight of 6, knight takes c6, b takes c6, and then e5 would be your normal mainline Scotch. But imagine if I had an extra move thrown in, like bishop to c4. Like the normal move in the Scotch would be something like queen e7, queen e2, and then shuffling this knight to the d5 square, which is available for black, and black is actually doing okay here. But what if d5 wasn't available? What if I had an extra move? Well, that's a big problem, because now knight d5 can't be played. So clearly white is going to have a huge advantage here if I have an extra move. Now that extra move wouldn't necessarily be bishop c4. So like if we played from a Scotch move order and you played h6, my extra move would probably be knight c3. And then if you continued with knight f6, I would continue with takes, e5, and I'm still blocking that d5 square, but I'm blocking it with the knight, I'm not blocking it with the bishop. But again, this makes your life really difficult. It makes black's life pretty much impossible. So this should just be some sort of advantage white. So kind of the argument that's being made here is after we have kind of this normal kind of Scotch, we're going to be playing this move bishop c4, and we're going to be approaching the entire thing from this move order. So you would get to this maybe from the move order e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop c4, h6, d4, e d4, knight d4. That's the move order that we're achieving this from because black has decided to play this kind of questionable h6 move. So now black should play something like knight f6 here. Now what's interesting is if I go from the Lichess database to the Masters database, Pavel Blatny actually had this position twice. This was back in the 90s, before they had computers, before they knew these positions were bad, because, Blatny is, of course, a very good player. And he tried this move, queen f6. And it should be noted that in both of the games where he tried this, even though he was playing against lower-rated competition, he still managed to lose both games. And white, in both cases, didn't even find the best to reply. They both played the move bishop e3, which isn't terrible. It should be slight edge white, but apparently knight b5 is major advantage white. And the computer basically gives bishop to b4 check, bishop d2, bishop takes d2, knight takes d2. The whole point being that knight c7 is a huge threat. King d8 would be forced, and then we would just ignore everything and just castle because we have this massive development lead, and of course nothing is really hanging in the position because a move like queen b2 wouldn't be possible because we would simply trap the queen with pawn to c3 followed by rook b1. And, after, for example, a6, rook b1, black's position would be completely lost. He's going to be down a whole queen. You can see the evaluation bar over here. It just went way up to the sky. So, Blatny's idea of queen f6 isn't very good, but the ideas that amateurs try here are also not very good. Like knight f6 is possibly the best move here. And here I would say go either with the normal plan of just playing knight c6, bc6, and then trying to play e5, or playing knight c3, which is the computer's recommendation. But what's interesting is it should be the same. because the computer recommends knight c3, bishop b4, and then knight c6, bc6, and now e5 apparently is a great move. And I would just recommend playing the same thing, basically. Knight c6, bc6, knight c3, bishop b4, and then e5 is, again, a great move. And this is supposed to be basically advantage white. The computer gives kind of a cool line here. The computer gives d5, and then the intention is to play here, and then queen f6, and then we're temporarily up a piece, but of course black is going to get it back. We're going to play bishop b3, d4. The idea here is queen e2 check. The king has to shuffle. Notice that this wouldn't happen if we had a few extra tempo. Actually, this whole line isn't even possible if black had a few extra tempo. If we go back to just the e5 push, normally you should be able to play something like queen e7 in a position like this, but in this case we would just castle, and there is no queen e5 because rook e1 pins the queen to the king. You really need this extra tempo to get castled and get your king out of the middle of the board. And without this extra tempo, so many of your central ideas for white that don't ordinarily work in the Scotch, they all seem to work here. So this all works very, very well for the person playing the white pieces, and it just all works pretty terribly for black. So, you know, again, we go back to this line, e5 takes. This line gets a little insane because, of course, black is going to play d4, queen e2, king f8, and now the computer wants to play bishop e3. I suspect, like, more sedate moves are even possible. Like, you can just castle and just declare slight advantage. You can see that your advantage hasn't gone anywhere. It's still saying, like, plus 0.5, like, even just dc3, bc3, bishop takes, bishop c3, bishop a3 check, king g8, and then just rook d1 should be simple, advantage white. White is, of course, down a pawn in this position, but as compensation, black is just never going to finish his development in any kind of natural way. And the pawn that black is up is a doubled, isolated pawn, so it's really not a big deal. But the computer's favorite line is to play bishop e3, and then after dc3, castle queenside. And basically the idea is if we keep taking, we're just going to play king b1, and then bishop e6, and now we're going to play something like bishop d4 or queen a6 and continue the attack. But bishop d4 makes life very awkward. Queen g6 and then queen a6 is supposed to be some sort of major advantage for white. And again, the idea just comes back to the fact that the black king just has no real clean way of getting out of the middle and finishing his development. So this position should just be advantage white. So this is just kind of the moral of the story here, is when your opponent wastes a tempo in the opening with any kind of early pawn push, like after knight f3, knight c6, if he plays h6, after like bishop c4, he plays h6, the remedy is going to be d4. And just go ahead and keep looking at the assessment bar. If he plays a6, the remedy is again going to be d4. And actually, if he plays b6, even though the computer initially likes just castles kingside h6 c3, if you plug in d4, it likes that even better. So against anything, pretty much any early pawn move, h6, b6, a6, any early pawn move, the remedy is almost always going to be pawn to d4, strike in the middle of the board, turn it into a Scotch where your opponent has played a weird extra pawn move that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.